What is up everyone, we are back with a brand new Back to Basics shading tutorial. Last month in November, we went over Linework in a 4-part series that was able to help a lot of you guys build the confidence to be able to do line work better. So to continue, for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be breaking down shading. If you're starting out as a beginner to tattooing, or you just need to refresh your skills a little bit, this is the perfect video for you. Also, sign up to our Tattooing 101 email list so you can get more insider knowledge about tattooing and level up your craft. I'll leave a link in the description below. Before we dive into shading, if you're looking to learn more about line work, I recommend you check out our last Back to Basics tutorial. Inside, we broke down everything you need to know about line work in a 4-part series. We went over all the fundamentals to make sure your line work is perfect. So let's get started with the shading. The first part, I'm going to explain all of the shading techniques and also how to use them. Next, I'm going to be going over all of the cartridges that I use for different types of shading. And then what types of machines that I use to get the best effect of what I'm looking for. First, I'll get into whip shading. So the basic effect of whip shading is when you are putting your sharps or your cartridge into the skin, increasing your hand speed as you're moving out and lifting up, creating a motion or a scooping motion to where it creates the darkest areas on this side, and then you are working up, creating less dots and less penetration and speeding up your hand speed so the dots are further apart, creating the shade. You'll see this mostly in traditional style tattooing to where you actually want to see the pepper marks in the tattoo. When it comes to whip shading, you want to pay attention to this motion right here. Like we showed in the Linework series when it comes to tapering out the line. It's pretty much the same technique, just with a mag. Once you have that motion down, you could use that to learn pendulum shading. So pendulum shading is just pretty much breaking down whip shading, but using it on both ends. So you start above the actual skin, you're going down into the skin, and then lifting up on the other side. So you're doing this back and forth to build up your tones through time. So I'll use this more for like realism or if I really want to get clean shades in my tattoos. So I'll show you with a machine what that looks like. So with whip shading, we're just going in and then lifting up. With pendulum shading, I'm working back and forth like this. And like I said, when it comes to whip shading, you want to focus on the whipping motion. But with pendulum shading, you're doing that whipping motion, but on both ends. Moving on, we'll go to stipple shading, which is pretty much using a liner to create tones to make it look like little dots in the skin that look like shading. So when I do that, I'm using the pendulum motion just with a liner, going over multiple times to build up the tones with little dots. Pretty much the only difference is we're going to be going over the area multiple times, but also with a lower voltage so you could actually see those little dots in the skin. You don't want to go too fast because it'll just create a solid line. After going over the different shading techniques, how do you guys feel about this so far? Do you feel like you have a better understanding of the different techniques you could use for shading? Let me know in the comments below. Now I'm going to go over the types of needles that you need for shading. As you can see here, I have a bunch of cartridges laid out here for you, and I'll go through them one by one and explain to you what needles you'll want to use. So here I have a few different mags. So with these, I have 2 bug pins and 2 standards. So the biggest thing you want to think about when it comes to the mags you're choosing is the gauge of the needle, which these are 10 gauge. So that would mean, technically speaking, these are double zeros. In the tattoo industry, pretty much everyone calls them bug pins. So this is something you kind of need to understand before going into it. When you hear someone talk about a bug pin cartridges, they are talking about a 10 gauge, even though that's not the appropriate term. So for 10 gauge, I'm going to be using these for more realism or smooth shading. This one I use quite a bit, which is a 27 curved mag. So I like curved mags because they give me more opportunity to go in at angles or build up tones without slicing up the skin. So pretty much every cartridge I use is going to be a curved mag. Next, we'll move on to my other bug pin that I use, which is a 15 curved mag, which is 10 gauge. These two I like to partner together because if I'm working on a realistic tattoo, I'm able to use the bigger areas with the bigger mag and go for the hard to reach areas with the 15. So these are the two I'll use for more realistic stuff, and the two cartridge sizes I use the most. Next, we'll move on to standards, which is 12 gauge. These are ones that I'm going to use for packing in color or traditional style tattoos where I want to see the pepper shading. So I have the two sizes I use the most with these, which is a 15 curve mag and a 25 curve mag. These are both medium taper. These are also by Black Claw. These are the cartridges I end up using the most. I really like them as a brand, and I've never really had one go out on me. Like the cartridges end up the grommet snapping to where there's a problem with the actual needles running. So this is the brand I use the most out of everything. These other two, here's a Peak Triton, which I also use, and Cheyennes. I like the Cheyennes for more realistic stuff, but for traditional and some really good traditional cartridges, I like to use Black Claw. For these, I'm going to be using them specifically for that pepper shading look and packing in solid areas of color because the gauge of the needles are thicker, so I'm able to really get that ink put in there without having to go over it multiple times and overworking the skin. So now I'm going to go over machines. And the biggest thing to think about with machines is going to be the stroke of the machine that you're using. So here you can see I have two machines set out. Both of these machines are different and I use them for different things when tattooing. When it comes to line work and color packing, so what I would use with these cartridges right here for traditional, I would use my Bishop Wand Packer, which is a 4.2 millimeter stroke. It works great for bigger cartridge groups and for really packing in color or getting that saturation I need. When it comes to shading and realism, I'm going to be using my Bishop Wand Shader, which is 3.5 strokes. This works great even with these 27 curve mags. It has enough power to push a bigger mag, which works great. So with my setup, the different styles that I do, this is what I'm going to use for realism. This is what I'm going to use for more traditional, neo-traditional, things like that. So if you try to use this machine, which is 4.2 stroke for smooth shading, it's going to just hit too hard. So what it's going to do is just overwork the skin when you're tattooing and cause it for problems with healing. This is why it would be easier if you use a rotary machine compared to a pen style, because you could adjust the strokes or get two different machines specifically for that. Now if you're using an Injecta, you could actually change out the cams and the bars to have them hit softer or harder depending on how you want to do the tattoo. If you're just still a beginner and you aren't exactly sure how much you want to spend on a machine, I recommend a machine from Easy Tattoo Supply that has a stroke that's able to be changed. There's tons of different machine brands out there, so I have a ton of reviews on YouTube if you would like to check them out and see which one you believe would work best for you and the style you're wanting to get into. If you were looking for a better machine that'll last you a long time, check out the Bishop Wands. These are the machines I use on a daily basis and they work. I use them for hours on end, never had a problem with them, and they're by far my best machine even after trying pretty much everything out there. So there you have it. That's the first video of the Back to Basics shading tutorial. Just to recap, we've gone over the different type of shading techniques and when you would want to use them, the different cartridges that you could buy, and when you would actually want to implement them into a tattoo you're doing. Also, why you want to go with curve mags over straight mags, the machine strokes, and also what stroke to use for the style of tattoo you're doing. In week 2 of the series, we're going to dive deep into whip shading and pendulum shading. I've got some fun exercise drills for you to check out, and that way you're able to follow along with me and do everything that I'm doing to improve your shading. So make sure you stay tuned and hit the little bell notification so you can keep up to date when I post my next video to this series. Thank you guys for watching. I can't wait to see you guys at next week's video.